So let's start with a raise of hands. How many of you are selling a product or a service at this stage? Like ML, AI, anything related to emerging technologies? Okay, so I'm pretty sure that one of your biggest challenges is actually education. So educating your customers on what you do, and and then of course you have to sell it. I normally give this presentation to people, to marketers, because I'm a digital marketer by trade, and I've actually run this research last year, so I released it like 9 months ago. A bit of background about myself. As you can hear from my accent, I'm Italian. I've got 15 years experience in digital marketing. I've been working for big brands, from WPP to Dan Suigi's, big corporate companies. And I'm also an associate lecturer in digital marketing at MMU. And I'm the founder of Digital Oracles, which is basically a company that helps startups, SMEs, enterprises to adopt blockchain technologies. So the research. At the beginning, I wanted to understand how digital marketers were using these emerging technologies, such as machine learning, to plan and strategize their campaigns. So I basically interviewed 10 CMOs around the world from big corporate companies. I can't really release the names for anonymity. But they were basically big corporate companies, and I basically interviewed them for a period of 3 months, more or less. And I started in January 2018. As every single research, we have to go through the academic findings first. So I went through hundreds of papers and researches to find out pretty basic things, such as digital marketing practitioners leverage machine learning mainly to acquire and retain customers. Surprise, surprise. And then, of course, machine learning is used to identify potential target customers, high-value customers, through different types of techniques, and such as clustering, for instance, or even to spot fraudulent transactions, and of course through opinion mining and social media listening. However, some of these marketers were also using it for chatbots applications. They were using to spot fraudulent transactions. So they were using it also for bidding. So then I went into the research findings, and this was very interesting, actually, and this is where your target audience is. When I actually looked into the level of knowledge of these marketers, I was actually surprised because all of them gave me different definition of machine learning. And actually, this definition is a collage of all the definitions and the pieces of information that I got. So none of them gave me a full, complete definition of what machine learning is. And even if you read this definition, actually is missing a part about prediction. So a lot of the marketers that are using machine learning at the moment are using it in a very tactical way to mainly do things on a day-to-day basis, alleviate really some of their pains. But they're not using it yet in a complete way to predict and forecast behaviors, for instance. Then I went into the adoption of this machine learning. So here it's interesting to see that, these marketers are using machine learning mainly to plan their marketing campaigns. But the adoption is still very limited. Again, very tactical. I'm not sure if you're familiar with programmatic advertising, but it's a way of buying advertising in a very data-driven way. For instance, Google, Facebook, or lookalike audiences creation. The limitations. Then I went into the limitation and I asked them questions. So why are you not using machine learning to its full potential? What is preventing you from doing that? Well, even if we're talking about big corporate companies, they still talked about high costs of implementation. And of course, high cost in terms of also hiring the right resources to adapt this technology and of course roll it into their departments. And of course, they talked about big costs, also in relation to customer segmentation and market intelligence. And for market intelligence, what they mean is basically like, social media listening mixed with some first-party data, so surveys that they were basically acquiring. So again, trying to make sense of the data that they have at their disposal. Another big problem, actually, and that is the one that was the most interesting for me, because it was a very recurrent keyword, lack of trust. And lack of trust in this case was lack of trust in the algorithms used within the companies, and lack of trust in the data fed into these algorithms. I actually went a little bit deeper in this, and when I talked to these marketers over the phone, I realized that it wasn't only a question of trust in the data, it was a lack of trust in themselves. Sometimes these marketers don't really understand exactly what they look for. So they're actually blaming the developer and the data scientist, and I'm pretty sure you know that feeling, people in the room. If you're a data scientist or you're a developer, most of the times you have problems communicating with people in other departments. So it is, again, an educational problem. Then I went into the digital marketing strategy, because I wanted to understand a little bit more about, what do they really do in terms of, day-to-day. So I asked them questions about how do you normally plan and strategize your campaigns? Well, it's interesting to see that most of them actually rely on tactics and personal experience and gut feelings. So even if you have a machine learning tool, an algorithm, or whatever tool, this is still what happens every time in every single company nowadays. So it's a cultural thing. Then we're talking about reactive planning. So this happened, this actually came out a lot, especially for retailers. Retailers that, have to switch campaigns very quickly. So imagine that for instance, it's raining out there. You have to basically change the advertisement from a T-shirt to a raincoat. If you have a machine learning, if you have something, if you have an algorithm-driven, planning tool, then that is easy to do. Or if you have data at your disposal that you can actually ingest and you can use to leverage your campaigns, then you can do that. However, we are still far behind from this. Programmatic advertising is helping, but it's definitely not very sophisticated yet. Then we're talking about strategic planning frameworks. Now, I'm pretty sure that you have all studied some sort of frameworks at universities. Well, when I talk to these people, all they used are Excel sheets. So they still plan with Excel sheets. So before you're going to go to machine learning for planning and strategizing, you have to beat, Excel. That's your main competitor. Some of the challenges. So I wanted to understand exactly what are the challenges for these marketers. Well, first of all, budget. So even if they have budget to run campaigns, sometimes they are not in control of the budget to actually get these tools. So they have to go through a lot of layers, within their organizations. And sometimes they have to get the buy-in from other departments as well, from their CTOs, for instance. Data. A lot of companies told me, we don't have enough data, funnily enough. Others said, we have a lot of data, too much data. Others said, yeah, we have data, but we don't know how to use it. Others said, we have data, but it's not fresh, and we don't know what to do with this anymore. A big thing, actually, is about to measure success. So what I notice is that a lot of marketers out there and a lot of CEOs out there ask for a marketing campaign to be delivered and to get results without having a clear business goal in mind. If you don't have business goals and objectives in mind, it's very difficult to have communications goals and objectives in mind, and then to measure these communication goals and objectives. Organization buy-in, big politics, politics is everywhere. Silo departments, which is also breaking communication, and of course, internal politics, as I said. So how can machine learning really help, this digital marketing? First of all, removing the human element from the decisions. This is what they said. We want actually the machine to do this for us, which is interesting. Predict customer behaviors by constantly reading customer signals across all data sources. So there is a need for real-time data that is there to help these marketers to make the right decisions. And of course, this came from omni-channel players, so online and offline. They were basically talking about how they wanted a machine learning-driven attribution model that could join the dots between the online and the offline world. So there is a big problem. The problem is data. Of course, first we need to, take the data. We have to collect this information. And in order to acquire this information, we need to gain the trust of the consumers. Once we have this data, then this data has to be, trusted by everyone in the organization in order to allow machine learning to become that, enabler of trustless decisions. Once we have done, so we have collected the data, we are aggregating the data, then we need to analyze the data. And in order to analyze the data, we don't need to have all the algorithms in place, but we also need to have tools, processes, and people educated to actually do that. And of course, we are talking about human bias. If we don't remove the human bias, then we'll always take wrong decisions. So could blockchain potentially be a solution to this? That was one of my key questions. Well, it definitely brings transparency. We saw today in the Microsoft room as well, to the transactions. It can decentralize all the trust in the intermediaries. Here there is a professor at MIT called Christian Catalini. You can go and find him on social media. Extremely clever guy. He's basically analyzed the Google bidding algorithms, and he basically demonstrated how there is a lack of trust in the intermediaries such as Google. So what he suggests is to actually have a distributed ledger that could decentralize the trust amongst all the parties involved in a transaction or involved in a department. Could that be actually applied to machine learning and to the algorithms? And of course, it regulates the relationships between all the parties within an organization and also between the machines, humans, data, by building a trustless environment. These are some of the examples that are applied in digital marketing at the moment, or could be applied. Transparency in ad buying, client-agency relationships. There are so many times that you are probably signing a contract and you have like a nice clause in there where you actually have your, you don't want to disclose your margins. Blockchain could actually increase transparency by making these margins completely available to everyone. That happens when Google is in the middle, Facebook is in the middle of an agency and then a customer. Data ownership, we touched on this before. You should own your data. That is definitely, something implicit, something that, in a year's time, hopefully 2 years' time, we're going to be here with our mobile phones in our pocket, and we will own our own data and earn money out of that. Decentralized decisions and data platform, of course. That is a totally different, it's a very interesting concept, and there are a lot of new innovations around this. But I want to leave you with 3 considerations. So, I know that a lot of people in this room are building solutions, building tools. I always say build solutions, don't build tools. Try to understand your target audience and go deep into the pains and gains of this target audience. Second, increasing transparency doesn't mean decreasing your privacy. That is a question, it's more of an ethical question that we should probably all ask ourselves. Transparency, blockchain is bringing transparency to the transaction, but could that be a problem? And last but not least is something that I have come up with, and it's an ethical data aggregation. We're always talking about, GDPR helped us to actually collect information and data in a more compliant way to make sure that we are protected. But what about CSR departments within organizations? Should they actually consider, to have a function within their department that is dealing with ethical data aggregation? So, this is me. Thank you very much. My time is up. Yeah? Cool, on time. Thank you.